All right, a little bit of breaking news. The UK Prime Minister Starmer will reportedly meet with the U.S. President Donald Trump next week in Washington, D.C., after saying he is open to sending British troops to Ukraine. This comes as the French President Macron gathers major European leaders for an emergency summit in Paris today to discuss security. And President Trump on the global stage. Former Trump Deputy National Security Advisor KT McFarland joins us now. KT, good morning to you.
Great to be with you.
So let's talk about the freak out on the world stage. The president is trying to start a negotiation to end the war. He talked about this on the campaign trail, and yet they're freaking out. And I guess the question is why?
I don't think they ever believed President Trump would really do this. I mean, President Trump has said his legacy is as a peacemaker. So what's he trying to do? He's trying to bring a rapid end to the Ukraine war. The Europeans, and frankly the Biden administration, for years has said we can't have a negotiated solution to that Ukraine war because we can't trust Putin. Therefore, let's not negotiate. Therefore, America, we expect you to shoulder the burden of any defense Ukraine is going to do. And for the British Prime Minister and the French president to be saying, look, America, you've got to do more, when they're not willing to do more, is just the height of hypocrisy.
Yeah, so to that point, this is what the UK Prime Minister is saying. He said, it's clear Europe must take a greater role in NATO as we work with the United States to secure Ukraine's future and face down the threat we face from Russia. So he's saying that he's willing to send troops to Ukraine. President Trump has already said that's not an option for the American military, though, right?
No, come on. I mean, first of all, the Prime Minister of Great Britain is the one who's cutting their defense budget. So put your money where your mouth is. If you really expect that you're going to play a major role in defense of Europe, you ought to be contributing to the NATO budget. You ought to be increasing your defense spending. And that's the suggestion that the British are going to put troops on the border of Ukraine or troops in Ukraine is what troops? Really? You don't really have that big a military anymore. And the thing that you're going to do it somehow without NATO, you're going to act on your own to send a military you really don't have that much of to a war that you can't possibly win. Again, I think it's just hot air they're blowing.
It's silly, and I don't think the British people would appreciate that as well. Let's talk about the negotiation. There seems to be this division in the media that they're trying to create between the president and Zelensky, saying if he's going to be a part of the negotiation or not. The president, Donald Trump, responded to that. Let's watch.
Well, we're working to get it done. I mean, you know, it's too bad it started. It would have been a lot easier to end it before it started, right? Because if he's going to go on, that would have been a big problem for us. And that would have caused me a big problem because you just can't let that happen. I think he wants to end it, and they want to end it fast.
Do you expect Zelensky to be involved in these conversations? What will his role be?
Yeah, I do. He will be involved, yes. Zelensky wants to end it, too.
Of course he's going to be involved. And KT, we know that Putin was the aggressor here. No one is dismissing that. But none of the world leaders wanted to talk to the guy. And Donald Trump is saying, we got to talk with him.
Yeah, I mean, how do you have a peace agreement? You have to talk to the opposition, the guy you're fighting. I mean, it doesn't mean that Putin is a good guy. It doesn't mean that he wasn't the aggressor. But there is a deal to be done, and it's with Vladimir Putin, not with all the British heads of state and all the other countries who are not contributing to the common defense.
Yeah, that's why the president is saying, we just want peace. He goes, I even want to get rid of some of our nuclear. But we got to have the conversation to start that negotiation. KT, thanks so much for getting up this morning.
Thanks, Lawrence.
You got it.